So up to yesterday, we discussed the cash management or the Vostro account management, and it is the most important function treasury of a bank or finance company does. A prudent cash management or fund management. So today, what we are going to discuss, introduction to cash management and cash flow forecasting, transactions when they are booked, and assumptions. And the basis that I have prepared today's presentation is that by comparing the cash management in the entities that are varying entities, like individuals to corporates to finance companies to the banks, and even in the case of governments or any other multinational organization, also could be the main features could be identified. So although our prime focus is going to be the cash management of financial institutions, what I want to discuss with you is and give you some understanding is overall comparison. So we shall discuss cash flow forecasting, working capital management, liquidity management, and using longer dated instruments in the cash management process. So introduction to cash management is the most important treasury management discipline. Each and every institution, the board of directors, the CEO, and the corporate management looks forward to the treasury to manage the cash flows well. The cash flows available in their position or in their walls, plus the balances in the accounts, Nostro accounts, Vostro accounts, and the transactions in the pipeline which is to come by way of debits or credits or assets or claims, assets or liabilities. If I tell you a good example, you will understand the importance of cash management or the treasury management in an organization. We'll take I think I showed you some balance sheets and then final accounts of compared banks in Sri Lanka at the beginning. One slide, we had column-wise each bank, deposits, the total balance sheet size, deposits, liabilities, and profits made, and so on and so forth. Now, in a banking organization, the liability side is going to be the shareholder funds, definitely shareholders' contributions, and deposits made by the depositors. Those are the main liabilities. And on the asset side, the one main asset item is going to be the loans granted, or the assets, which is going to be about 60, 70, sometimes in the case of some institutions, 80%. And also the other investments made seeking higher returns, like investment in the stock exchange and various other investments. So how does this banking institution make profit, interest income out of those assets minus the interest paid on the liabilities or deposits. Interest income minus interest expense is, if we take it as general income or profit for a period of 1 month or 1 year or period, you will see the difference, shall we say 1 billion assets or loans and 1.5 billion deposits. On the deposits, interest is paid about 4%, shall we say on average 4%. And on the assets, interest earned could be in the region of 7%. So 7 minus 4 is 3% on 1 billion. There should be about 300, there should be about 30 million profit. 30 million profit. But if you analyze those actual figures of a bank, that 30 million, whether that 30 million is recorded as profit at the end of the year, you will see surprisingly it is about not 30 million, it's about 300 million. Multiples of that. How come? That is because mainly some additions of fee-based income, true, but more importantly, the wholesale cash management. The treasury management has brought in about 200 million or more income to the organization by way of exchange income, by way of turnover, buying and selling of treasury bills, treasury bonds, and then on the wholesale, larger the fund managed, the larger the ability to make more profits. So that's where the treasury management or the cash management is really important when it comes to the actual performance measurement of an organization. So cash management is an active management of a company's or an individual's short-term resources to sustain ongoing activities, mobilize funds where needed, and optimize liquidity at lowest cost. At lowest cost. What do you mean by at lowest cost? For a financial institution, the deposits taken by way of current accounts is the lowest cost. Then comes this deposits taken on the savings accounts. Then comes the deposits taken on the fixed deposits or term deposits. So on an average, you compute the average cost of funds. But when deposits are marketed, marketing guys goes around to seek more deposits for the organization, for the bank or finance company. Depositors are also wise and prudent. They don't want to leave they don't want to open an account and leave the whole money in the current account where they don't receive any interest. They will leave the minimum to meet the day-to-day fund need in the current account and then shift the funds to a savings account, or in most cases move them to a term deposit account or fixed deposit accounts where they can earn little more interest. So there is some endeavor to attract low-cost funds, that is the current account deposits and savings account deposits, by the marketing teams of the respective banks and finance companies, giving more attractive schemes, gift items, and so on and so forth. And of the asset and liability management perspective, there are other mechanisms such as drawing up maturity buckets or maturity ladders, you call it, from overnight up to 1 week, up to 1 month, up to 3 months, up to 6 months, up to 1 year, and more than 1 year. The maturities of both liabilities, that is deposits, as well as the assets, compared with both, there should be more assets maturing in each time bucket than maturities or liabilities, because there should be more fund generated but through maturities of investments and loans, maturities or recoveries, to meet the maturities of deposits to pay them out to the depositor. So in this game, the liability base should have been priced at a lower cost. Otherwise, at the end of the accounting period, when you draw up the P&L, profit and loss account, there will be a minus if you price the liabilities higher. So there is an endeavor to price the liabilities at the lowest cost. So principles of cash management. Now, I would urge each and every one of you to listen carefully and then ask questions, because this is going to be a comparison. And these are the factual presentations that I made just last month to a degree program in a university. So this is with regard to the financial institution management. This is some materially important facts that I'm going to discuss. So please listen carefully and then interrupt me at any point in time and then ask questions if you don't understand. Because this entire discussion series, the entire slide series here is really going to enhance your knowledge for sure. At the same time, it is going to help you to get through the exam, plus go through your professional career with an understanding, with a studied or very much considerate future. So please feel free to interrupt me and ask any question if you don't understand. So principles of cash management. A company can improve its chances of having adequate cash by following basic principles of cash management. Increase the speed of collection on receivables. What are the receivables? The more quickly customers pay, the more quickly the company can use those funds. Now, what are the receivables in the case of a company or a finance company or a bank? The receivables are the loan installments, basically. Loan installment consists of interest for the period, interest on the loan amount that was granted to the customer, applicable for that period, 1 month or 1 year, 3 months or 6 months or 1 year, and the capital repayment amount. So those are the receivables. So in particular financial institution, particularly in a financial institution, if the loans are not recovered, or if the borrowers do not pay the loan installments, by a directive of the Bank Supervision and Non-Bank Supervision Department of Central Bank of Sri Lanka, those loan installment going into arrears must be categorized into these 4 or 5 specific categories with a dedicated time frame. Say one customer has borrowed some money and his loan installment is due to be paid on 20th of each month. If the loan installment is not paid, if the loan installment customer does not make adequate money in the savings account or his account for the bank to recover, or for the finance company to recover the loan installment for the first month, the customer sends reminders and those sort of things. And first installment is negotiated or discussed by the recovery officers or the bank or the finance company, and persuaded to pay. When the second installment doesn't come, virtually 60 days after, first installment 30 days, second installment is 60 days, then that particular loan outstanding should be categorized under special mention category. Then after 60 days, when the third installment, after 90 days, third installment is also not through, must be categorized under overdue. Then next month, 120 days, it is going to be past due. And beyond next month, it is going to be categorized as non-performing advances. This categorization is mandatory, and nobody in loan administration department of a bank or a finance company can manipulate these figures, because they are recorded in the computer system of the company or the bank, and regular reports are submitted to the banks, submitted by the banks to the Bank Supervision Department, and by the finance companies to the Non-Bank Supervision Department. So therefore, they could monitor. And mind you, those report submissions are online. The core banking package, the reports are prepared, and then the reports are downloaded into an online connection with the central bank, and once you upload those reports, in most cases they are automatic uploads, and only a case of putting a password to get transmitted. And the Non-Bank Supervision Department or the Bank Supervision Department of Central Bank could monitor the development. If they are, usually there are 2 or 3 executives looking after each bank accounts or each finance company account at the central bank. They are able to analyze each and every loan or advance or facility granted to a customer. So therefore, for the fund management or cash management of an entity, this function is extremely important. And the banks do everything possible to prevent a customer falling into these categories. As you know, after probably 6 months' time, banks have the authority by a Parliament Act, by the Banking Act, that the collateral, the mortgage property, can be auctioned to recover the. Is there any question? The banks, after those loans of advances of facilities go on under non-performing advances, where there are mortgaged properties available, by the Banking Act, special provision, and also the Special Debt Recoveries Act 1991, banks have special power to auction those mortgage properties called parate execution. This power is called parate execution. Banks loan administration department or credit administration department prepares a board paper to the as a board resolution, and then if that is approved at the board meeting, that's the only requirement, and banks need not go to the courts to summon the borrower and then go through a court judicial process. Banks, by simple resolution at the board of directors, they have the power to auction those mortgage properties and recover the loan outstanding. Now tell me, why have the statute or the by Act of Parliament, banks have been given this special power, parate execution power? You may have heard this power before. What is the reason? That the reason is the most important factor that I want to discuss with you here in the topic of cash management. The reason is that these loans are granted by the banks, borrowers, using depositors' money. Customers come and deposit money in the banks, and the banks do grant loans using that funds. Banks take all the precautions to evaluate a loan application before granting the loan, and they take all the precautions wherever possible. They will take the mortgage properties, movable property or immovable property, as collateral, and mortgage as collateral. And in the case of default, and then the borrower is not paying paying the loan amount borrowed, depositors' money is at stake. The bank will not be able to pay the depositors their money that it was deposited at the bank. So to protect the depositors, the banks are given this parate execution power. Merely the credit administration department has to prepare and present it to the board for approval, and once it is approved, the legal department takes so, and as the newspaper department and various other processes are there, that this person who have borrowed such money from the bank, so much outstanding, and the mortgage property, all the boundaries and other descriptions are given, will be auctioned date by an auctioneer, so and so. So the bank's duty is to auction the mortgage property and recover the dues, the loan outstanding plus the interest that is due, and fees and other expenses, including the auctioneer's fee that was an expense from the proceeds. And if there's any balance left over, the customer's account, the borrower's account is credited. So everything happens in a very transparent manner. But the banks try to avoid the customers falling into these traps, special mention, overdue, past due, non-performing advances, those categories. Customers are advised to be careful, be aware, and then even the banks would try to give each and every concession that is possible, including rescheduling of loans, reducing the interest rates. There are various methods of inducing the customer to pay the loans. And furthermore, if it is a business that is run by the borrower, banks even get into the business to correct any wrong, derail processes in the business, in the customer's business, to bring the cash flows of this customer to a professional cash flow and then make them pay the loans. Because when more and more Parata execution notices appear on the newspapers and the public domain, the banks get the bad name. It's not a marketing, positive marketing, it is negative marketing. So therefore, banks would like to avoid such instances. So therefore, the receivables, loan installments are carefully monitored, and any sign of loan installment going bad or not being paid is discussed with the customer, negotiated, and then whatever the support that the banks could give, they would give of the first hand itself. Right? So that's one, the collection, speedy collection of receivables. Next is keep inventory levels low. Now, in the case of a corporate company who uses raw material to produce, and so on and so forth, and even in the case of banking institutions, if they are stationary or any other utility amounts, material that are being stored, they would not stock up the cash in inventories or all those storable items. They would keep minimum amount of stationery and whatever other utensils that are required, and then order them just in time when they are required. Then delay payment of liabilities wherever possible. Firstly, being financial institutions, to maintain the reputation, finance companies or banks cannot forego paying electricity bill, or water bill, or tax bill, or any such liability payment out is always paid by those financial institutions right on time, because that itself is a damage to the reputation. That itself is damage to reputation. And then also one other very sensitive issue is payment of salaries of the staff. Payment of salaries of the staff, if that is delayed, any emoluments payment delayed means the employee rights or the employee union activities will start, and then they will speak loud, shout out, and then that is itself will be a publicity that there's some cash flow deficits or poor cash management of this financial institution. So therefore, it is these are the principles that are to be followed when the cash management is done properly. So in the case of salary payments and other emoluments payment to the staff, it is done through the human resource department in those organizations, all right, but they do have to be advised by the treasurers to avoid such disputes as much as possible, because it is going to be difficult for the treasurers to manage the cash flows when there is bad reputation. Ultimately, what happens is that the limits given by the other banking institutions to this particular organization are reviewed or reduced when they see this sort of calamities happening. And for the first sign of cash flow management difficulties, all those limits will be gone. So in that sense, the possibility of borrowing money in the call money market or any other through any other source will be very hard. Common cash management products offered by banks. Check outsourcing. All your check payments could be outsourced to a bank. Now, these are the services available by banks to corporate customers and then various other large customers. But still, I want to discuss these issues with you so that you could compare the cash management processes available in an economy to individuals, to corporates, to the large corporates, to the finance companies, to the banks. So you will get a better idea and then better knowledge, common general knowledge of the processes practiced in the economy. Then RTGS, real-time gross settlement system, is also a common cash management product used by the banks and finance companies, and also marketed to the corporates and individuals as customers. Then payroll and vendor payments via slips and SEFT. Sri Lanka Interbank Payment System and SEFT is Common Electronic Fund Transfer System. Both these systems are managed by Lanka Clear, and what are the payments finally settled through the accounts maintained at the Domestic Operation Department of the Central Bank. And finance companies, through their respective banking accounts, they could use these slips and SEFT on a concessionary basis. Inter-account transfers. For a banking institution, transferring from one account of a customer to another account of next customer doesn't make any difference, because the deposit base will stay the same in their wholesale banking computer, core banking computer, just debiting one account and crediting another account. Inter-account transfers. But when it comes to a third customer who maintains an account with another bank, only the problem is then only the slips, SEFT, RTGS systems has to be used to transfer money, which involves a small fee. In the case of slips and SEFT, something like 30 rupees or 50 rupees per transaction. But RTGS transaction involves a fee for 1,000 rupees or little more per transaction. Then third-party fund transfers. When fund transfers are effected to third parties, this includes payment of salaries of the staff. Staff may open and maintain accounts in various banking institutions, various finance companies. So when the corporates and the banks start paying the salaries of the staff, they have to use these payment systems very effectively to credit the accounts maintained by those individuals in different banks and finance companies. Just imagine government paying the salaries of school teachers, government pays salaries of all the hospital staff, doctors, nurses, attendants. All those happens through slips and theft. Then pay order requests and draft request. Pay order and draft, of course, similar items. So it can be compared with checks issued by the outside customers. Pay orders and drafts meaning the official checks of the bank. So which has more value or more risk-free for the beneficiary. Because when it is issued by a bank, signed by two officers of the bank, that itself is a measure that the funds will be paid or transferred to the beneficiary when the pay order or draft is cleared through the clearing process. But in the case of third-party check, the availability of funds on the third-party account is doubtful. You cannot verify whether there is funds until you excuse me. You cannot verify the necessary account on those accounts on which these checks are drawn until you clear the check, because banks normally wouldn't give the customer information to outsiders. Then outward telegraphic fund transfer, outward telegraphic fund transfers, local and foreign. TT payments. TT payments usually go through SWIFT. Yesterday we discussed about the SWIFT MT-103. And banks usually charge for those payments out. Then cash flow preparation. Inflows, income, sale proceeds are normally inflows to the cash flow, usually denoted by a plus sign. Outflows, expenses and material purchases are outflows or minuses to the cash flow. And when you complete the in and cash flow out, and then you know for the day which side is more. If the inflows are more, if the inflows are more, then there is positive cash flow at the end, and then you cannot leave the positive cash flow like that. You need to invest that to obtain a return for the day, at least for the overnight until next day. When there is a outflows are more. In that sense, there should be good efforts made to bring in some inflow to at least match the deficit in the cash flow. These cash flows are maintained currency-wise in each currency, especially in financial institutions. There are nostro accounts maintained in different currencies. All those currency cash flows has to be prepared and finally converted to the home currency KR values, not on the physical conversion, but at least on the spreadsheet, the amounts are just converted and equivalent amount in home currency must be ascertained. Then consolidated into one currency, home currency. All entries with prior information to the treasury. And cash flows maintained and managed by the treasury. Therefore, all the departments, all the sections, all officers wish to make any payment or bringing in any revenue must be notified to the treasury, because all entries with prior information to the treasury. If unknown debit or credit happens without the unknown to the treasury, that can be a problem, especially when it is an outflow. There can be a deficit or overdraft, or the worst case, the payment or outflow payment may not materialize. Payment may not go because bankers wouldn't pay when there is adequate balances in the account. Then treasury should be alert for uninformed, suddenly appearing items. Usually the treasury dealers who are in charge of cash flow just excuse me, please. Hello. Where the number? I'm extremely sorry about it. I'm giving a number, wrong number. Anyway, all entries with prior information to the treasury. If unknown entries happen to the cash flow without the knowledge of treasury dealers who manage the cash flow, that's going to create lots of problem. So therefore, as discussed one of the days prior, most of the transactions happening in banks, in various units of activity like imports, exports, travel, and then leasing, loan disbursement, all that through the core banking system, the cash flows are usually updated without intervention. As soon as the transaction is booked in, they are updated. So therefore, there are a very minimal number of transactions that need to be manually informed to the treasury dealers who are processing or managing the cash flows. But even then, the treasury should be alert for uninformed, suddenly appearing items. They should be in constant touch. Now, for that, the modern technology helps. Now, especially the central bank account maintained by the banks and finance companies, they are given online access. Each moment, whenever there is a debit or credit posted to the account at the central bank, they can see on the screen, and then they can take immediate action to remedy the situation. If there's a credit, analyze the situation and then apply the funds, and then if there's investable funds, take steps to invest. At the same time, if there's a payment out or debit, uninformed debit, they can analyze and then arrange for funds to meet such debits very quickly. Then ideally computers, spreadsheets and dashboards are prepared automatically picking up the balances in the nostro accounts, cash flow accounts, and then those spreadsheets and dashboards are communicated through the computer system itself to every officer, every executive responsible for the management of cash flows, including the CEO, Managing Director, and CFO. Because they should know the cash position of this, each and every cash account or nostro account. And they are usually carried through instant dashboards with different colors. When there is a deficit or balances falling below a certain level, to appear the figures in red, so that they could take immediate clarifications from the respective dealers or treasury, and then take appropriate action to remedy the situation. Then comes cash flow forecasting. Cash flow forecasting. Cash flow forecast is a projection of an organization's future financial position based on anticipated payments and receivables. Collect information, ensure accuracy of information, decide how far out you want to plan for. Cash flow planning can cover anything from a few weeks to many months. List all your income for each week or month in your cash flow forecast. List all the cash you have got coming in. List all your outgoings. Work out your running cash flow. So this is a forecasting. I think I have a example slide later on coming up. So this cash flow forecasting is done for each and every nostro account managed by the banks and finance companies. And going by that, they can prepare for a week or a few weeks forward or a few months forward. Basically, when there are shortage of funds in a few months' time, they can work out through the marketing departments to carry out special deposit mobilization campaigns to target those months to replenish the cash. When there are excess cash flows, of course, it's trying to find ways of employing those excess cash flow for the period in excess. And the mostly used practice is that engage in foreign currency swaps, buy sell or sell buy swaps, depending on the interest rate differential, the premium or discount that is generated has to be managed within permissible rules by the central bank regulator and then by the management. Treasury dealers engage in these swaps very often. Now, what is working capital? Working capital is basically the fund amount that is available for day-to-day management. In accounting jargon, working capital equals current assets minus current liabilities. I hope you all understand what are current assets and what are current liabilities. Current assets are the assets that are maturing in very short term. assets are maturing, when the assets are maturing in long term, they are called fixed. An element of fixed assets. Similarly, current liabilities are liabilities maturing in a very short term. And there can be liabilities like the shareholders' funds maturing in very long time. Short-term liquid assets remaining after short-term liabilities have been paid off is the working capital. Short-term liquid assets remaining. Short-term liquid assets remaining after short-term liabilities have been paid off is the working capital. So for any organization, including manufacturing organizations and finance companies and banks, this working capital is really important. Working capital in the case of a manufacturing organization or trading organization is for management on the day-to-day affairs. And it is very easy for the CFO or treasurer of a manufacturing organization to just give a telephone call to the bank and then ask for a temporary overdraft in the case of shortage of funds to manage working capital to manage on a day-to-day basis. But in the case of finance company and a bank, there is a more in-depth process to manage the shortage of working capital. So therefore, the concept of working capital is extremely important. It is a measure of a company's short-term liquidity and is important for performing financial analysis, financial modeling, and managing cash flow. The working capital availability, but saying that you cannot leave excess amount of funds idling in the nostro accounts, because excess amount of funds idling without being employed to earn interest is again drain of profitability, drain of income. You are foregoing your income, opportunity cost, which will reflect in the P&L very badly. Working capital and reputation. Working capital is a financial metric representing operating liquidity available to an organization. Along with fixed assets such as plant and equipment, working capital is considered a part of operating capital. Now, cost of working capital is also material. Cost of working capital is, there are formulas to compute the cost of working capital. Mostly banks and finance companies consider the savings deposit base as the cost of working capital. They would consider the other term deposit or fixed deposits as being employed to grant loans or acquire long-term assets. But maintenance of cost of working capital is therefore, if the working capital amount required is far more above than the savings deposit base, meaning you have really mismanaged the working capital. You need to have an eye on the amount of working capital maintained. Then optimal level of working capital again has to be ascertained, discussed, particularly in the banking institutions. There are committees like Asset Liability Management Committee, Strategic Planning Management Committee, and Credit Committee, and so on, where they discuss the level of funding requirement on a daily basis, basically the working capital. Impact on reputation when current liabilities are not honored, particularly on by financial institutions, the reputation makes a huge difference. So therefore, working capital maintained must be adequate to meet the current liabilities, current payments out. Working capital management briefly. A well-run firm manages its short-term debt and current and future operational expenses through its management of working capital. Components of working capital are inventories, account receivables, account payables, and cash. I have picked up these words from the accounting jargon books, but however, in the finance companies and banks, there are items under these categories: inventories and account receivables and account payables, basically to indicate that current assets and current liabilities. So account receivables are current assets, account payables are current liabilities, which has to be paid out. And in this context, cash is also considered as a current asset, cash maintained in the vault or with the cashiers. Now, this is a slide I told you that the liquidity gap, liquid maturity bucket. This is a very simple maturity gap analysis of a bank or a finance company. Maturity gap analysis of a bank or a finance company. You will see on top the maturity buckets segregated into about 7-8 maturity buckets, starting from less than 7 days. But most of the banks have a first maturity bucket as next day and the spot date and 1 week. But here, just for being an example only, I thought less than 7 days is adequate. The next one is 7 to 30 days, 7 to 30 days. Then next one is 1 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 months to 12 months, 1 year to 3 years, 3 years to 5 years, and 5 years and over. And 5 years, over 5 years, and also unclassified column is also there. And then for each category, the total of these items are given in the total column as well, like the balance sheet item. So this is more or less a maturity gap analysis of a finance company or a bank. On this side, you get assets, and the total assets is on the first column, first row. All the stuff assets, and what are the figures appearing here? Total appears here. Then the bottom part is the liabilities. Total liability row is here, and all these are total liability items. You will see on the first column, less than 7 days, the assets maturing within 7 days are 188,300. Can you see the figures? They are small. I'm sorry about it. And on the first column, up to 7 days, liabilities maturing are 313,605. So maturity gap 313,605 minus 188,300 is minus 125,305. So up to 7 days, there is a minus maturity. In the sense, there are more liabilities maturing than assets. You get a point. Can this organization survive when there are more payments out within 7 days than money coming in from the asset, maturing of assets? I don't think so. So therefore, preparation of this kind of statements are going to assist the cash management process dramatically. I mean, when you take it constructively. So we must be worried, why is this more liabilities are maturing here? You see, demand deposits or current account deposits are maturing 235,026. Saving deposits are maturing 64,997. And then you will also observe that rest of the maturity buckets do not have a figure here. So meaning, in preparing this maturity bucket, the total current account balances and total savings account balances have been taken to the first bucket. So it's a mistake, isn't it? Does any banking institution have to pay the total current account balances and total savings account balance on the within 7 days? No, they don't. On a day-to-day basis, withdrawals happens only about 3 to 5% of this total amount. So therefore, at the committee level or at the discussion level, the CFO or the CEO at the ALCO meeting will ask the treasurer to rectify this error. They will ask them to take 3 or 5% or maximum 10% of the first maturity bucket of this total amount, because by going by the experience, current account withdrawals for a day would happen only about maximum 5% on a daily basis. On top of that, new deposits also are attracted provided the reputation is maintained perfectly. The reputation of the banking institution is material to attract new deposits. So similarly, savings account 64,997 is also total amount shown here. Savings withdrawal per day again could be maximum of 5%. So in both cases, if you take 10% each to be on the safe side and spread the balance among the other maturity buckets, majority should go for 5 years and over or unclassified, because always there is going to be a hardcore deposit base, provided the reputation, provided that there is no run on the bank because of an adverse event. So therefore, safely, majority of these deposits can be posted unclassified of 5 years and over. So in that case, this can very well be, if you take 10% of these two, it is just 20,000, 25,000 instead of 235,000 and 64,000. If you in total, if you roughly about 25,000 here or 26,000. So in that case, this will be a positive gap. This will be a positive gap. So the preparing this kind of statement should reflect the actual picture. It is very hard to obtain figures and then prepare a statement to reflect the actual picture. In other words, if it is fine-tuned to perfection, this maturity gap of 125 minus 125, 306, 305 should be the actual cash flow balance at the end of the day. And there is further development. Last row has a cumulative gap, meaning up to 7 days, 125 or 305, then cumulative was also going to be the same figure. When it comes to the 7 days to 30 days bucket, there is 46,993 liabilities maturing, and there are assets maturing 129,038. So there is a positive gap, 82,046. So that next row cumulative gap, meaning 126,305 negative, 82,045 positive. Balance is negative 43,206. So supposing if this was adjusted to be a positive, then this positive figure plus 82,000 will add and come and reflect here as a cumulative gap. So likewise, this type of statement, when they are reflecting the actual perfect scenario, is very helpful to the treasurer. Very extremely helpful to the treasurer to manage the future cash flows, to decide whether excesses. Now, again, 1 to 3 months is going to be a negative cash flow, maturity gap, negative maturity gap. So the treasurer or dealer can plan to, if they have a separate foreign currency US dollar cash flow, they can sell dollars, generate rupees here, and buy them back after 12 months. So 3 months against 12 months, sell by swap. So this rupee cash flow will be covered. This is how important that the maturity gap statements are. Extremely important. There are other importance of these statements. If you apply rate sensitivity to these assets plus liabilities, now in the case of demand deposits and savings deposits and time deposits, there are interest rate paid. These columns can be expanded to another column adjacent to each column and then reflect the interest expense. And in here, assets will generate income, loans and advances will generate income. And the adjacent column where the rate of interest that are generating interest income can be posted, meaning the adjacent column can give the total interest income in total, and here the adjacent column can give the total interest expenses in column. And then total interest income minus total interest expense is the P&L for that period, 7-day period, or 1 month, 1 month period, or 1 to 3 months period. So that's a forecasted or projected P&L. So which is very valuable to the treasurers to prepare such accurate and perfected gap reports to manage liquidity to manage cash flows, to manage P&L. And when where they are lacking liquidity, you can arrange for liquidity. And where they are lacking inadequate income and there are more expenses, you can plan for other avenues of income or reduction of expenses to make those period P&L look better. I hope you got a better idea. Liquidity risk. Ability to meet continuing obligations and financing assets is the liquidity risk. Your organization ability to meet the continuing obligations and ability to finance assets. There is an example, Northern Rock, in the year 2007 in the UK. I think I discussed this with you before, I don't know. I think I discussed it with the university crowd. The period that we experienced the subprime crisis, this particular Northern Rock is a small bank which failed in August 2007, despite the support given by the Bank of England, ultimately taken over by the government, because it was a relatively small bank, did not have sufficient depositor base to fund new loans and mortgages. Remember, I discussed with you about the mortgages being bundled and sold. This particular Northern Rock was in that business. Although it did not have customer deposit base, very small, not a sizable customer deposit base, their mortgage portfolio was large. To grant more and new mortgage loans, what they used to do is they used to bundle the existing mortgage portfolios and sell it in the market to other banks, other investors, and generate cash and then give more mortgage loans. But as I discussed the other day, the subprime borrowers, when they started defaulting with the high interest rates and then not so performing economy, the subprime mortgages were going to default, and the discount attached to the subprime mortgages bundles were enhancing to the tune of something like 40 rupees for every 100 rupees. In the usual market, it is about 98 rupees per 100 rupees. So therefore, this particular Northern Rock, when they were not able to sell any more mortgage bundles, and the existing mortgages given to subprime borrowers were not paid off promptly, the bank could not carry on business. So finance new mortgages through selling existing mortgages to other banks and investors and borrowing from the money market and credit market. So the borrowing from money market and credit market also dried out. Knowing the performance of this bank was poor, limits by other banks in the money market and credit market, limits to this bank was also reduced and withheld. So therefore, this bank, Northern Rock, crashed. And in the initial stages, Bank of England offered support, but the deficit was so huge, it could not just survive. and then finally it was taken over by the government. So this is how important the liquidity management is. In Sri Lankan banking and finance company have these arrangements or directives by the central bank. Preparation of maturity gaps. Preparation of maturity gaps, as we discussed just a while ago. And the SRR currently at 2%. Statutory liquid asset ratio at 20% of liabilities, meaning another measure of liquidity of each bank and finance company. The total 20% out of the total liabilities must be in liquid cash, liquid assets. Not only cash, liquid assets like investment in treasury bill, treasury bonds, readily marketable assets, 20%. Then there's another measure called liquidity cover ratio, LCR. And there's another measure, net stable funding ratio. All these are to measure the liquidity available, maintained by the banks and finance companies in their books, in their management of assets and liabilities. Bank rate, I explained to you the other day. In case of difficulty, central bank lends at 8.5%, but they will step into the management of the particular entity and they will appoint their board of directors and the management will be taken over by the central bank. So that the rate is at 8.5%. The contingency funding arrangements must be arranged by each and every bank and finance company. That is to say, if by any chance if there are going to be a difficulty in raising funds to meet the current liabilities, there should be pre-arranged procedure to generate funds. Like in the first case, as the first step, selling of liquid assets like investment in treasury bills and treasury bonds, investment to be liquidated. And when there is a crisis, as you know, the buyers of treasury bills and treasury bonds will demand their own price. So it is going to be a more or less a forced sale value, not a normal market rate that they can obtain. So first step is to liquidate their marketable assets, securities. Second step is more likely to be borrowing in the money market, call market, and then from friendly banks. And third level is going to be speaking to your main banker or central bank and arranging special placements, or in the case of central bank, borrowing under bank rate. So likewise, there should be 4, 5, 6 steps, one after the other, lined up and materially proven steps to be produced, to be approved by the central bank, bank supervision or non-bank supervision department, to be accepted as a contingency funding arrangement for the institution in case of a crisis, in case of a difficulty. Then serious business, liquidity risk management is a serious business of Treasury Committee and Asset Liability Management Committee. And one of the contingency funding arrangements normally arranged by banks and finance companies is that obtaining confirmation in writing from friendly peer banks that in case of a crisis, that friendly peer bank would be able to lend 10 million to this particular entity or 100 million to particular this entity. In other words, the limit that is allocated by the friendly banks to this particular entity has to be got as a confirmation in writing, approved by the board of directors of that friendly peer bank, in case of crisis, that they would be lending this to this institution. They will prepare to lend to this institution to the amount of 10 million or 100 million or 1 billion, whatever the amounts that they wish to indicate. So those are the contingency funding arrangements. So SRR, statutory liquid asset ratio, LCR, NSFR, some more information. Is available here. Please read through them and then enhance your knowledge. And this is in practicing the monetary policy, the central bank, how they create excess liquidity in the banking system. And then this explains the early 2020 COVID pandemic arrangements by the central bank to create more liquidity in the system. That was the part of monetary policy practiced by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka to overcome the impact of the COVID pandemic in the economy. And this also has a little bit of information of controlling liquidity by the central bank. Again, how they used to practice the monetary policy in the economy. This is to indicate when the central bank reduced the statutory reserve ratio to 2% from about 5%, how the liquidity increased. And whenever they want to decrease the liquidity in the system, they can very well raise the SRR back again to from 2% to 3, 4, 5, or even 10%, and require the banks to maintain that amount in the bank in the account with the central bank, so that that amount of money will be kept in the central bank without being available for lending to the customers to reduce the excess liquidity in the system. So these are also important, since there is little time available. I will discuss these slides when we meet next, but that will be somewhere in, not in May, but somewhere in June, because from next class onwards, 4th of May, you will learn treasury bills and treasury bonds related lessons from Mr. Mangala Karunaratne. I will also be a participant, so I will also know where you are heading. And these things are little in-depth material, important for economic activity, economy of the country, and then banking system. Let's talk on this when we meet next in the month of June or so. But however, if you just read through, also you can understand very much now that I have given you the fundamental basic idea of this economy, high profile wordings, and so on and so forth. These are the avenues of available with the central bank to manage the cash flows, auctions, treasury bill auction, the settled by security auction, and the forex swap transactions conducted by the central bank. All right. So I hope I was able to give you basic idea of cash management today. And with whatever discussed so far, you can be confident that you'll be getting the questions for the exam in those areas, plus a little bit of general knowledge in this field. So let's hope that we can progress successfully with the second semester as well, and see how best we can increase your knowledge. So let me have any questions from you if there are any. No questions? Mahil, Praveen, any questions?
No, sir.
Good, good, good. So I'm surprised now. Everything what I say had been understood and digested very quickly. You all have been very hungry for knowledge. I'm very happy, extremely happy. All right. You are sure there are no questions? And as a final note, I must tell you, most of you have done well in the. So let's hope we can keep the same momentum with the exam as well. Right. Niluk, any comment from you?
No, sir.
No comment. Oh, good.
Sir, sorry, just one more thing. So the exam, when it gets fixed the date, it will
Yes.
contain whole of this semester one, right? So meaning
Yes,
the
yes.
remaining slides will also be examined, I assume.
Yes, yes. There'll be exam for each semester.
Yeah. So the remaining slides that we missed out today, will that also be included in the
No,
questionnaire?
no.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Right. Very much worried about the exam result, right?
Worried about the exam.
Yeah, good to be good to do justice for the investment that your management makes on you. Yes, very good.
Of course, sir.
There are some people who never spoken on the over the entire class. Why is that? Anyway, I hope they can speak in future. So let me wish you a successful learning, and then hopefully we'll see you on next Tuesday.